trying to delude herself. It was not hers at all, not her voice at all, and no doubt would have. Vital she should. After 15 minutes of this, the audience is aware that it is undergoing a profound and primal experience. The precise nature of the experience remains elusive, causing us to ponder on it long after the event. In some performances, "not I" is repeated after an interval. Curiously, this does not always work. The piece is best seen and heard on its own, and then left at that. The sight of that almost obscene, isolated mouth giving voice to the words takes on a chthonic life of its own. Now can't stop. Imagine, can't stop the stream, and the whole brain begging, something begging in the brain, begging the mouth to stop. This is the stream, the scream, the unstoppable, unbearable torrent of consciousness, the unending, unstoppable voice in the head that goes on regardless of sense, of meaning, of suffering. How our life is comprised of this unending gossip which goes on and on in our brain, yet in a way, ultimately this is all we have. The short prose pieces that Beckett continued to write were, for the most part, less successful, but they too contained occasional flashes of genius, such as could not have been produced by anyone else. Beckett was determined to go on, no matter what, as he put it encouragingly, fail again, fail better. Among the more successful of these pieces are Lessness, Enough, and Old Earth, the last of which begins with the memorable, Old Earth no more lies. These pieces attempt to reach the very heart of the human experience, to grasp our essential being, to gain inklings into what, ultimately, experience is. This is literature so close to philosophy as to be indistinguishable. It is a form of creative philosophy, and as such harks back to Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." One of Descartes' best-known works is his Meditations, and this is precisely what he was doing when he was philosophizing, meditating upon what he called the first or ultimate philosophy. These later pieces of Beckett's short prose may also be seen as meditations on the process of living and thinking, attempts to come to terms with and understand the full import of Descartes' famous conclusion. Beckett's meditations include both more and less of our humanity than Descartes'. They discard the rational calm of Descartes, the civilized vision of the Enlightenment. Beckett's voices, his beings, express all our irrational fears, yet always retain an element of their rationality. Even when reason is lost, it is eventually regained, so that its absence can be rationally assessed and the endurance can continue. The endurance itself, I must go on, is a persistence far deeper than rationality. It is the persistence of life itself. This is how our being evolved. This is how we emerged from the primeval slime to become what we are. Beckett's vision remains open to all manner of irrationality. We are all born mad, some remain so. Yet at the same time it is focused by its reductionism. They give birth astride a grave. The light gleams an instant, then it's night once more. Beckett concentrates upon that gleaming instant like no other. In his late 70s, Beckett's years of ill health and heavy drinking began to tell. In 1986 he became prey to recurrent bouts of giddiness, which caused him to have several serious falls, both at home and in the street. By now Suzanne was in her mid-80s and ailing too. Age had caused a deterioration in her normally stoic character. As a result, she suffered from bouts of anger, much of which she directed at Beckett. For his part, Beckett was deeply upset by this turn of events. In 1987 he moved into an old people's home. This was a modest establishment, and Beckett lived in a sparse room with just a few books and his bottle of Irish whiskey in the cupboard. Outside was a bleak garden, with a single Godot-like tree. Friends who called were shocked at Beckett's impoverished quarters, but he refused to spend his considerable fortune on anything better. He had all that he needed. In July 1989, Suzanne died, and the 83-year-old Beckett followed her 5 months later, December the 22nd, 1989. Afterword. To add an afterword, after such ultimate words as Beckett's, would seem more than presumptuous. Still, it is worth briefly considering the after-life of his words. Beckett's works continue to divide their readers and audiences, and the feelings evoked are seldom less than impassionate. Sam is either a great personal favourite, subject to much hero worship, or Beckett is reviled as a load of pretentious nonsense, as filled with rubbish as the stages of his plays. In the eyes of his admirers, Beckett has attained the canon of great literature. Such status is extremely difficult to achieve, but once achieved is all but impossible to lose. It is doubtful that Beckett's detractors, even the most learned, commonsensical, or prestigious, will succeed in dethroning him, while each new generation of young readers finds such rapport with his works. Pessimism such as Beckett's always has its appeal. It mocks experience, authority, and achievement, all that stand in the way of the young. Yet the appeal of Beckett's perversely determined brand of pessimism is not limited to the young. It has an ability to withstand the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to which youth may be particularly prone, but which in old age become a permanent condition. The philosophy of such pessimism bursts the rainbow soap bubbles of illusion, leaving us blinking with stinging eyes at unremitting reality. Yet such defeatism is no soft option. Beckett had iron in his soul. His was the wry humour of those with fortitude, those who withstand all misfortune. His voices may be those of the defeated, of the truly hopeless in their various guises, but the fact is that they never admitted final defeat. "In the silence you don't know. You must go on. I can't go on. I'll go on." Beckett's chief works in English. Beckett translated almost all of his own later works from French into English. These translations are often slightly different from the originals, and unlike so many translations, are literary works in their own right, quite the equal of their originals. Horoscope, 1930. More Pricks Than Kicks, 1934. Echoes, Bones and Other Precipitates, 1935. Murphy, 1938. Waiting for Godot, 1953. Watt, 1953. Malloy, 1955. Malone Dies, 1956. The Unnamable, 1958. Endgame, 1958. Krapp's Last Tape, 1958. Embers, 1959. How It Is, 1964. Film, 1964. Imagination Dead Imagine, 1965. Texts for Nothing, 1967. Breath, 1969. Not I, 1972. Mercier and Camier, 1974. Old Earth, 1974. All That Fall, 1979. Chronology of Beckett's Life and Times. 1906. Samuel Beckett born on Good Friday, April the 13th, second son of William and May Beckett, at Foxrock, South Dublin, Ireland. 1914 to 1918, World War I. 1916. Easter Rising in Dublin by Irish patriots against British rule. 1922. Ireland gains independence from Britain, with Ulster, Northern Ireland, remaining British. 1922 to 1923, Irish Civil War. 1920 to 1923, Beckett becomes boarder at Portora Royal School in Ulster. 1923 to 1927, studies modern languages, English, French, Italian, at Trinity College, Dublin. 1927, wins gold medal for Best Scholar in final exams. 1927 to 1928, Beckett teaches for 2 terms at Campbell College, Belfast. 1928, goes to Paris as reader at École Normale Supérieure, meets James Joyce. 1929, Wall Street crash signals worldwide Great Depression. Beckett's first publication, essay, Dante, Bruno, Vico, Joyce. 1930, Beckett's poem Horoscope wins Cunard Prize in Paris. 1930 to 1932, becomes lecturer in French at Trinity College, Dublin. Resigns after 4 terms. 1931, publishes Proust in London. 1932, beginning of Beckett's 5 years of wandering in Germany, France, England and Ireland. 1933, Hitler comes to power in Germany. Beckett's father dies, leaving him small private income. Begins 2-year stay in Chelsea, London. 1934. Beckett undergoes period of psychoanalysis, publishes collection of short stories, More Pricks Than Kicks, in London. 1935. Breaks off psychoanalysis, publishes collection of poems, Echoes, Bones, and Other Precipitates, in Paris. 1937. Settles permanently in Paris. 1938. Seriously wounded in stabbing incident in Montmartre. Lives together with Suzanne de Chevaux-Duménil. First novel, Murphy, published in London. 1939. Outbreak of World War II, in which Ireland remains neutral. 1940. German invasion and occupation of France. Beckett registers as neutral national, living in Paris. 1941. Joins cell of underground French resistance. 1942. Resistance cell in which Beckett is involved, penetrated by Germans. Beckett and Suzanne flee Paris for south of France, eventually settle at Roussillon in unoccupied Vichy France. Beckett supports himself as farm labourer and begins writing What? 1944. Paris liberated by Allied troops. Beckett and Suzanne return to Paris. 1945. End of World War II. Beckett returns to Ireland, finishes writing What? Returns to France, working for Irish Red Cross in Normandy. Awarded Croix de Guerre for his work in French resistance. Begins writing in French. 1946 to 1947. Highly creative period of writing in French, produces novels, stories, and a play, none of which are published. 1947. Beginning of Siege in the Room. Writes Malloy. 1947 to 1948. Writes Malone meurt. Malone dies. 1948 to 1949. Writes En attendant Godot. Waiting for Godot. 1949 to 1950. Writes L'Innommable, The Unnameable. 1950. Beckett's mother dies. 1950 to 1952. Writes Texte pour rien, Texts for Nothing. 1951. Malloy and Malone meurt, first 2 novels of the trilogy, published in Paris. 1952. En attendant Godot, published in Paris. 1953. First staging of En attendant Godot at Théâtre de Babylone on Left Bank in Paris. 1955 to 1956. Writes Fin de partie, Endgame. 1958. Writes Krapp's Last Tape. 1960. Writes Comment c'est, How it is. 1961. Marries Suzanne de Chevaux-Duménil at Folkestone in England. 1964. Flies to New York for making of Film with Buster Keaton. 1969. Awarded Nobel Prize for Literature. 1972. First production of Not I. 1974. Writes Old Earth. 1989. Death of Beckett at age 83. This concludes the reading of Beckett in 90 Minutes by Paul Strathern. Copyright 2005 by Paul Strathern. This book was read by Robert Whitfield. This unabridged recording was published by arrangement with Ivan R.D. and was produced in 2009 by Blackstone Audio Inc., which holds the copyright. Neither this recording nor any portion of it may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authorization from Blackstone Audio Inc. If you would like to obtain a complete catalogue of our titles or our monthly update telling you about new releases and our new collection of books on CD and MP3 CD, call 1-800-SAY-BOOK. That's 1-800-729-2665. You may also obtain the same information from our award-winning website. Our address, all one word, is www.blackstoneaudio.com. Thank you.